So we know that groups are different. Different meaning that they become an important part of the way that you build your files inside of Illustrator. But they're different because they also have the ability to take on attributes. The same way that I can apply a drop shadow, for example, to a shape inside of Illustrator, I can also apply a drop shadow to a group inside of Illustrator. So you have to think of a group inside of Illustrator as an actual object itself. However, we start to see some problems with regards to workflow. For example, in the previous movie, we showed how you can basically apply a drop shadow to a group, but then if you were to ungroup that particular group, the drop shadow disappears. So let's see how we can start editing groups once we have them created. I'm working in a file here called Editing Groups, which you'll find inside of Chapter 9 in the exercise files. I have one logo element here, and if I click on it, you'll see that I've already created a group. I'm going to go to the Effect menu, and I'm going to choose Stylize, and we're going to add a drop shadow to this. Click OK. And now I have a drop shadow applied to the group. Remember that we know that if I click on this, I can see that my target is my group. And if I go to my Appearance panel, I see very clearly that the drop shadow belongs to the group, not to the contents of the group on its own. For example, by the way, I can double click on the word contents here. Now I've changed my target. My target is the bold word here. Notice that my target are now mixed objects. By the way, should I apply a drop shadow now, all the individual elements will get a drop shadow, just as it did when we applied it to individual objects in the previous movie. So you can change the target very easily by doing that, but I'm going to go ahead and double click on the group, and now I'm back to the group as being my target. Now, when I mentioned before that we have a problem in a workflow perspective, let's explore a possible design-related issue. Say this comes back from the client, they love the design, but they need to add a trademark symbol to this particular logo. Now, obviously, you want the trademark to be part of the group as well. Now, in the past, if you had certain elements that already existed inside of a group, and then you wanted to add additional elements to that group, you probably created the shape, then went ahead and ungrouped all the elements in your group, selected everything all together now, including the new elements, and then regrouped them, which may have worked fine then, but if you have an attribute applied to the group, when you go ahead and you ungroup your object, you'll lose those attributes as well. Let me illustrate this by giving you an example. We're going to go ahead over here. I'm going to deselect my shape. I'll go to my type tool here, and I'll create a point text object, and I'll type Option R to create a registered trademark symbol on my keyboard. That's on a Mac. On a PC, it would be Alt R. And I'll go ahead and I'll just change the size here. I'm just going to go ahead and scale this up to make it just a little bit bigger so we can see it. And maybe we'll go ahead and we'll fill this white. So we'll go ahead and we'll change our fill color here to white. And I'll drag this registered trademark symbol, let's say right about over here. Let's just put it somewhere where we all know that we can see it. Now, if I go ahead and I move this design element elsewhere, that registered trademark symbol is not part of the group. So as I mentioned before in the past, I might go ahead and I might choose Object Ungroup to ungroup all my elements, but notice now that my drop shadow disappears. Even if I now go ahead and I choose all the elements and I choose to regroup them now into one group, the drop shadow doesn't come back. Once I got rid of the group, the drop shadow disappeared. So what we want to do is we want to find a way to add that registered trademark symbol to our artwork without having to destroy the group. So I'm going to press Command Z or Control Z just to go back to where I had the drop shadow applied to the group. I'm now going to take this registered trademark symbol and I'm going to copy it, or actually cut it to my clipboard. I'm going to hold down Command X or Control X on PC. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use something called the isolation mode feature to get into the group. So I'm now simply going to go ahead and double click on the group itself. Notice that background now, it's dimmed, but it's no longer selectable. I have now isolated my group here. You can see over here, this gray bar. I am now in layer 1, and I'm now inside of this group here that I created inside of layer 1. Now if I choose Edit and I choose Paste in Front, that shape now is being isolated currently inside of my group. So I'm in my group. Now that particular shape belongs to this group. If I now double click outside this area to return to regular editing, this shape is now part of that group. In this way, I don't lose my drop shadow at all. So when I'm working with particular groups and I want to either add or delete elements from a particular group, rather than ungroup and then regroup my objects, which would then go ahead and blow away any appearances I may have applied to that group, I'll now use isolation mode to dive into a particular group, make whatever changes that I want to there, and then exit isolation mode when I'm ready to move forward. Now again, here in the case of the registered trademark symbol, rather than copy and paste it inside of that particular group, I could simply just double click on the group to enter isolation mode, and now type it from scratch in this particular location. Now, in my object hierarchy, I'm now creating artwork. I'm basically inserting this artwork into the correct location in the hierarchy. Any shape that I create now automatically belongs to this group. In fact, to illustrate that point, watch what happens if I go ahead and I take, let's say, an ellipse, and I click and drag to draw it just about over here like this. When I release the mouse, you can see that now the drop shadow automatically is applied, and these are all combined into one shape, because this now belongs to the group, and the group has a drop shadow on it. If I exit isolation mode, these objects are all grouped together, and they all have the drop shadow on it. Now, while isolation mode does make it a little bit easier to work with groups itself while you're editing them, there's another way that you could also work with groups and even see objects on an object-by-object basis in a list. That can be found inside the Layers panel. So next, let's explore how working with layers works inside of Illustrator as well.